So the ADA was passed in 1990.
Yeah.
And it was implemented in 1992. And one of the number one questions that we get when we talk about this is, how dare it's taken so long and why?
Yeah. And we're not there yet.
Yeah, right. But why has it taken as long as it has to get where we are today?
You know, it's a difference of perception. I think for someone like myself, without any mobility issues or other disabilities, my perception of life is completely different than if I was in a wheelchair. So I think that there's a tendency to believe, I think for real estate professionals in particular, that most people are looking for what they're looking for.
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective. I see that. Yeah, one of the things that I found right away as we started putting all this together was that there is fear.
Yes.
There's fear of saying the wrong thing, of doing the wrong thing, of getting yourself in trouble, of making somebody mad. So in the big picture, when someone asks me, well, why hasn't it been done yet? It hasn't been done yet because, or it hadn't been done yet, was because of fear. And real estate is just data.
Yeah.
I mean, it's data in, data out. It's how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, what's the square footage, what school district is it in, and the data goes on. And there was no place to add accessibility in the data because of fear. They were worried about, the MLSs were worried about liability, and the realtors were worried about the Fair Housing Act. So when we got into this, we both knew there was a chance we were going to get in trouble doing it. And maybe we've gotten a few people mad over the course of time. But the fear is now subsiding a bit.
Yeah, substantially so. I've noticed I first created Able Environments in 2004. And back then, I mean, if I talked about accessibility and disability, I got blank stares.
Right.
And a lot has changed in the last 20 years. A lot has changed in the last 10 years since you and I have been together, and really showing this to the real estate industry. And it's changing every day. I think it's becoming, we'll have another conversation about this, but the pandemic was a massive cultural shift for the world. And I think for the first time, workplaces that were discriminating against people with disabilities because their place was inaccessible suddenly realized that the accessibility of their office space meant nothing, that it was the person behind the disability that was the huge asset that they were completely ignoring. That made a massive change, I think, in perception.
Yeah, it did, absolutely, because I love to say this, if everybody was in a wheelchair, the whole world would be wheelchair accessible.
Yeah.
So accessibility is, a perspective that as we're opening up people's eyes to what accessibility really is, you don't necessarily need to be afraid of it because it actually impacts so many more people.
Yeah.
So back to the question of why wasn't it done? It really wasn't done because the right group hadn't come forward yet and taken the challenge put in front of them to actually add accessibility to the database. And that's where the Northwest Multiple Listing Service was a huge ally for us, because they gave us the ability to get into their database and add accessibility to the database.
Yeah. And again, it comes back to perception, because I think why it hadn't been done a lot is because most people thought it doesn't relate to me.
Oh, yeah, right. And that it was really ugly and it was a devaluation of a property.
Yeah.
I remember when we first started this, we talked to people at brokerages and they'd go, well, accessibility is, white stale tile and crappy grab bars and a ramp that Uncle Bill and 5 bags of concrete built with a 6-pack of beer.
And it kind of was.
And it was, but not anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as it's moving forward, one of the things that I really enjoy was working with RESO, the Real Estate Standards Organization, because again, accessibility is just data when it comes to real estate.
Yeah. Well, it's taxonomy too.
So explain taxonomy.
Yeah, you and I both came from the Microsoft world at one point in our lives. And one of the projects that I had there was to work on knowledge management because every division in Microsoft did the same thing, but they called it something else. And they didn't talk to each other about it. So, they said the intellectual capital of Microsoft was worth like 10 times the physical capital, and it walked in and out of the doors every day, and often retired once they got their nugget. But if you call something, and we use this example, if you call something a bedroom as versus a BDRM, you're not going to find it if you look for one or the other.
Right.
So there has to be a consistent taxonomy, and that's where RESO, the Real Estate Standards Organization, really came in and helped when we worked with them to say, we need to call this the same thing.
Right. So now we've got it implemented in Washington. We're working on Ohio, and the goal is for us to get the same taxonomy built into all 400 and I think it was almost 500 MLSs around the country now. So again, I'm going to go back to that question of why hadn't it been done? Well, there's a whole bunch of reasons why it hadn't been done. And one of the other reasons was because realtors were afraid to talk about it because of the Fair Housing Act. The Fair Housing Act says that me being in a manual wheelchair, I'm a protected class, and there are several protected classes. So legally, I'm not allowed to market my own house to myself using the terminology that we would think to use. For example, I'm not allowed to use the word wheelchair. Yeah. The Fair Housing Act says I can't use the word wheelchair. Yeah. So what we did was, in trying to figure out how to get around that dilemma, was we took the person out of the equation.
Right.
So, for example, me, Barry, has a disability. I'm a manual wheelchair user. I'm a paraplegic. But when we talk about the houses that I'm looking for, we talk about the accessibility needs that I have, the ramps and the stereotypical ramps and the grab bars and the wide hallways and the counters that I can roll under.
Yeah.
And when we're looking for and marketing that, we're not talking about Barry in the wheelchair anymore.
Yep.
We're talking about the feature set of the property that I need because of my disability and my needs.
It's not the disability, it's the accessibility.
So that was a fear that people were afraid to talk about Barry because they'd get themselves in trouble, but they don't need to.
Yeah.
So again, that was one of the reasons why it took so long, was moving me out of the way to talk about the feature set.
Yeah.
Even though I'm the one that needs it, but we don't have to talk about me anymore.
Yeah, one of the favorite expressions I heard one time was, disability is simply the failure of an environment to adapt to a person's needs. I go, that's a perfect way of describing it.
Absolutely. It's the cartoon that we use in our training of the front of the school building with all the kids waiting because it snowed, and the janitor's shoveling off the stairs, and the kid in the wheelchair said, well, if you shovel the ramp, then we can all go in. And the guy was like, well, I have to shovel the stairs because most people use the stairs. Yeah. That was just the perfect example of that mindset. And really what we've had to do is just change the mindset.
Yeah.
It's that, I love it. You said perception.
Yeah.
That it's the perception of what is needed, and it doesn't have to be something that's feared.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of times when I used to give talks, and you see examples of places that were made accessible, and people would say, it's great that they did that for them.
Yeah, I hear that too.
They didn't do that for them, they did that because it's the right thing to do.
Right. Well, also, there are quite a few aspects of accessibility that people don't think about that they use every single day. And I'm just going to take two examples. Yep. Electric doors in grocery stores and malls and places, that those electric doors, they were designed originally to help someone who couldn't use the button to open the door or the doorknob, but yet every mother with a stroller, every person with a cart, it benefits all of us. And the second one, well, there's three actually. There's closed captioning, which you should have on every TV and every bar you go to. That was designed for the deaf. And then texting.
Well, an even better one, curb cuts.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. I like those.
Yeah. Yeah, that's ADA.
Yeah.
But if you had a shopping cart now going out of the grocery store and there wasn't a curb cut, make a significant impact. In fact, I love what the expression that, if you design for accessibility first, you usually come up with a better product.
Yeah, that's true. So here we are 35 years later, give or take, and we've come a long way from where we were when the ADA passed, but there's still a long way to go.
Yeah, one last thought on that too is that when people said, it's nice you did it for them. Well, you really got to realize that life is a continuum. Right. And an expression I heard one time is that our houses are static and our lives are not. And at some point in time in our lives, we will all be them.
Right. Well, that's the goal. You know, we're all trying to
better
get
than the
older.
alternative.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
So, looking at the why, well, the why is what it is, but yet we've changed that. We've turned the corner now, and it's fun to see where we've taken accessibility and where it's going to go next.
Yep.